Hey guys, it's Tiny Tom Logan back with a croaky voice for you. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Hyte Y40, the baby brother to the Y60. You may remember that had a 45-degree angle on this corner of the case. Now this comes with a slightly more generic design, but also comes with a much lower price of just $149. I say that just in comparison to the old one. I'll get the light out of the reflection. But get yourself comfy and let's get tuned in. I always start at the top and the front, and this pattern was on the Y60, and I actually kind of like the fact that they've mimicked it with this, and it does follow through without the brown stains to down the side of the case as well. Now the front of the case is pretty much predominantly just that glass panel, and I want to say it doesn't have any edges, but they're just cleverly concealed. There just isn't one on the kind of outside edge, the more visible one. You can see that there is black inside, but the glass does go over the top of it. And then at the bottom on the AIO, not AIO, but the IO, you can see that you have a combined headphone and microphone port, and you do get an adapter in the case to split that out into separate 3.5mm jacks dependent on your headset. You can see here that we've got two USB 3s, a USB-C here, and then the power switch here, and the little square around the outside lights up white on the white case, which is what I've got, and it pleases me greatly. Around the back of the case, you can see that I've actually lost the motherboard I/O backplate over the years that I've been using this equipment for testing cases. I have no idea where I left it. It probably went back with the case. But you can see that there's a slightly more familiar layout, and by that I mean that the power supply is actually underneath. Now you can see the expansion slots on the back are actually half height ones, and the case does come with a half height riser cable add-on for you to be able to mount your graphics card with. Now the good thing that they have done this time is there is more room on the outside for your graphics card. Obviously things like the 4090, we've started seeing some monstrously thick cards, but the old Y60, the graphics cards would have sat quite close to the the glass panel on the side. So by them having this 4-slot arrangement and then probably another slot before the edge of the glass is more about the fact that there's more room for your graphics card to breathe. You can see that there's a 120mm fan fitted in the back, and this, along with the one in the bottom that I'll show you in a moment, are the only fans that you do get in the case. You can also see some cable tie grommets down the side of the case here, so that if you did want to keep things super tidy, you could take your Ethernet cable and your USBs and clip them down the side of the case so that there's not a big mess around the back. This is something I'd love to see on more cases out in the wild. Now when we do go round to the back, again I showed you the pattern on the side, and if I turn it round you can see that it's a metal panel but with plastic inside, and that there is some dust filtering on that. Now I've not tried to go too careful with the cables here, and I never do, but one of the main reasons is I kind of need to move the cables out of the way down the bottom to show you that there is a fan down in there as well. So there's a 120mm lower fan. That, along with the rear exhaust, is the only fans that you do get with the case. But you can see I've fitted a couple of 140s in the side there. There are mounts for 120s as well. There's also a couple of mounts here for 2.5-inch hard drives, whether that's solid state drives. There's a plethora of mounts for cables, or tie downs for cables, pass through here and here without rubber grommets to go into the main chamber for the bulk of the cables. I do really like the fact that the cutout for the CPU isn't square. They've left it, well, they've not left it, but they've designed it with that funky kind of curve to it, and also it's been slightly pressed during the manufacture as well, which just gives it an extra kind of vibe that they've made a bit of effort. There is at the top a pass through again into the main chamber, but I'll talk to you a little bit more about that in a moment. When I was talking to you about the fan previously, I forgot to mention there is a brace that runs around the outside of the underneath of the case. You can see the white bar around there. That does help you route the I/O cables at the front, but then it kind of goes around. And I think it must become some kind of extra bracing and support for the design of the case, where there's not many corners to hold weight and keep things rigid. But what that does mean is the fan does actually partially sit underneath one of those braces. Now, there is some perforations in there, and this is the best I've been able to get the camera to be able to show you. So air can pass through, but it is slightly restricted. I would hasten to think that if this was going to be a case that I was going to permanently put on my desk, I'd probably Dremel some of that out to try and clear up the airflow, because it covers about 10, maybe 15 millimeters of the fan, which is obviously on the major sweep of the circle for the fan as it's spinning. So back to the roof, and I normally wouldn't cover the roof twice, but I wanted to put the case onto its side so that I could show you a little bit more of something that I actually think is amazing but ridiculously simple. So there is mounts in the roof for 320mm fans, which means you can put a 360mm radiator in the roof, and apparently you can fit a 240 or a 280 in at the same time down the side, because there is this dead zone here where the fans would be, and there is ample room for you to be able to get a radiator in there as well. But that's not the thing that I wanted to talk about, because the thing that I wanted to talk about was this very simple cutout here. Now, on a lot of cases this would be covered up, and if you had fitted your AIO in the case already and you were coming to fit the CPU fan cables, or maybe even the 8-pin because you fitted your power supply at the end, this would be covered up, and you'd be trying to squeeze your fingers in the top of the motherboard from the open and main section of the case, and it's a total pain in the bottom, and it's something that I have cursed about many times in the past. But what this cutout allows you to do is just pop your fingers in. Even with the big radiator fitted, that would be completely covering up these headers, and you can still fit it. And the 8-pin, again, I mean, admittedly I can fit my fingers in the back, but if I was trying to do it from the other side, I would be having my fingers down here, and if I had an AIO in here, I actually wouldn't be able to get my hand in down here at all. But because of this little cutout, which again, like I said, is such a simple thing, it does mean that I can get my hands in there from the top and refit the 8-pin. And they genuinely deserve a gold badge for that in itself, because why that isn't commonplace with every other manufacturer on the planet, I'll never know. So on to the business side of the case. Now, this is where the airflow comes up from that lower fan. Now my power supply comes to about here. The fan is roughly there. So you do have to be careful with your power supply cables. It may have looked a little bit of a mess underneath for mine, but they were clear of the fan. But that's really where your airflow kind of target is. So it's very compact down there. You are asking a lot from it. Now the vents only go to the 4th ridge, so that's where the limitation is. It doesn't go any further this way. I'm not sure whether that's a good or a bad thing. I'm pretty sure that that would have come up in the R&D for the case originally. But it does mean with just a normal 2-slot here, you can see that you do get a fair amount more room than you did on the Y60. But one of the things I would suggest, especially with things like the 4090 and stuff that are going to overhang quite a lot, is the end fan on the newer graphics cards blows straight the way through because of the cutout. So it does mean that you're going to have a part where the graphics card is blowing one way, and this probably being intake is going to be blowing this way. and you're going to end up with a bit of a dead zone. You could obviously flick these round so that they're on exhaust, but then that means you're going to have the roof on intake, and I don't necessarily think that having the roof on intake is going to help with airflow here at all. But it does mean, as you'll see in the testing in a minute, you're probably going to need to experiment with airflow options, take a few hours out, do some benchmarks just so that you can get an idea on which way works best. I'm still going to say that probably this being intake is going to be your best idea, even with the kind of dead zone problem, but it would be something that would probably require a little bit of extra research. You can see here the half-height riser cable, which does come with the case, which is nice. PCI Express 4, it comes with a nice mount in the bottom. It's all pre-mounted, makes life really easily. Yes, it's got an air cooler. We use the same kit to test everything because we do this in a way to try and pick out the differences between the cases. As you'll see in a moment, we've tested this and we can compare it to a lot of other cases because of it. But what we have done is broke protocol, and we actually added in a pair of front fans and a pair of roof fans to help with otherwise we wouldn't have had any data for this at all. We are pretty much on to a conclusion now. So as I said, we're pretty much on to a conclusion, and we ended up running the fans that I added in at 1000 RPM. Now the lower 120 and the rear 120 goes up to 1100 RPM, and we just had those on max for the test that you'll see pop up in the graph now. Now, we had to add fans in this because at the end of the day you would at home. Now we used the Hyte Be Quiet fans because they're cool, they're quiet, they're not like £35 each, they're just nice, quiet, middle of the road, they will work fans. Obviously, if you wanted to invest extra into like some Noctuas or Fantech fans or the Cooler Master fans that they released recently, the Mobius, they do RGB and non-RGB ones, in case you're wondering. You could get maybe some better results, but I would suggest that the problem with this case again, as it was with the Y60, is going to be the airflow layout. The lower fan does make a difference. We've got about 1.5 degrees higher temps by turning it off. So it is working in moving air up here. Maybe changing the lower one to like a Noctua or one of the fans I mentioned previously may help things. I do think that you are going to need to invest wisely with your case fan choices when you build this case though, because it could make or break it. Now, it's, as you've seen with the graphics card temperatures, both with and without the fan, it's above the fold. It's what I would call below average. It's at the top of the graph, it's in the warmer edge of the graph. Some people will say it's because we're using a blower fan. I have tested other cases that went like this with a normal graphics card as well, like the Gigabyte 3080, and I have the RX 6700 from Power Color that I've tested in other cases like this in the past. And in reality, what ends up happening is the blower fan tends to be the cooler of the two. And by adding the others in with a fixed fan speed, because we fixed the graphics card fan speed to 60%, and by fixing it, then that means it's just the environment that it's in that will change the temperature. So for air cooling, or at least with 1000 RPM, other fans that I've added in, it didn't seem to go too well. So you will need to think about what you're going to do, but you do have plenty of room in the roof for a 360mm radiator, which you can obviously put some decent fans on as well, and that could easily cool your graphics card and your CPU, but you could add another one in the front side as well. And I happen to think that where you have this borderless window at the front, a well-chosen water cooling kit in this could work rather well. And then also, if you were to do that, you wouldn't necessarily need to worry about the lower 120mm fan down here. And I think you could probably get rid of it and maybe put your pump or your reservoir hidden down there instead. So overall, CPU temps were middle of the pack, good, no reason to complain. GPU temps, little bit warmer than we would like, but it's kind of one of those ones that you just have to assume that if you're going to buy this case, then you're building something that's going to be very visually pleasing and not necessarily the best performing case on the market. The problem is though, is despite the fact that it is borderless on the front, where we've now not got the 45-degree kind of side to it, it does get quite close to a lot of other brands that are using a lot of glass. So rather than it being unique, it's quite similar to some of the others, which means there's going to be a lot more competition, and they may well cool more thermally better out of the box. But the thing to stress here as well is it's $149, and it does come with a riser cable out of the box. What it also does is, because of the half height on the back, it comes with a riser cable out of the box with enough room for a fat graphics card to be able to breathe as well. If you were really worried about it, you could just leave the side off, although I think that's going to just be dust bunny hell. But nevertheless, it's a cracking looking case, and there are a few negatives, but at the same time there are a lot of positives. Because if you think about it, I know there's a case launch coming up in a few days where the riser cable add-on is $90. So if you were to add this onto this case, you're already then looking at $240, $250. So it's an aggressively priced case with that in it, and it does still look really nice as well. So I'm not telling you to buy it, I'm just giving you all of the options, giving you a few argumentative points for you to be able to make your own decision on whether you like it or whether you don't. I like the fact it's very aggressively priced, but I think it's a shame that there's the airflow hasn't necessarily been done better, and in reality, like I said, it's quite close to a lot of other cases designs other than that L-shape pattern that we see here, which is quite striking. But I think you can make an amazing looking case in this, especially once you start putting some selective lights in there and everything as well. Dress the case with light, as they would say. But anyway, that is my thoughts with a very muzzy head, because I'm suffering with just winter illness at the moment. But thank you very much for tuning in. Like, subscribe, comment, go and have a look on the Tiny Tom Logan Facebook page. There's going to be a lot of Shedio stuff going on in the not too distant future, and if you haven't seen that, then you might be missing out. But for now at least, this is the tiniest one with another video for you. Out. Ding! Love you, sis.